Today we're doing something very interesting. We're covering something that you would find on the table of a working man, even a poor person. We're going to be doing a peas pudding. Thanks for joining us today on 18th Century Cooking with James Townsend and Son. Peas in the 18th century can be really tricky, how they show up in the cookbooks. Because at least today, in where we live, when somebody says peas, immediately green peas come to mind, garden peas. But in the 18th century, in all of these references to peas, the peas don't always mean green peas. They don't always mean garden peas. Sometimes they mean a field pea. Something like maybe today, the closest thing that easily comes to mind is black-eyed peas, which are really beans, right? Well, in the 18th century, peas are a very common food for poor people, and those peas were usually field peas. And that's what we're going to be covering today. And you can see kind of what we've got here for peas. They don't look anything, well, these kind of look like peas, but they're green. But on the inside, underneath this little covering, we've actually got a yellow pea under that. There are many different kinds of field peas in the 18th century, and the names are all over the place. They're fun. Blue peas, white peas, fat marrow peas. So they had all these different kinds of peas. So today, for our peas pudding, what we're going to be using are yellow split peas. Probably one of the closest thing that you might find in a grocery store today that will be the equivalent to the standard field pea of the 18th century. So for today's recipe, we're just really going to need just a few things. We've got some peas. We got some yellow split peas already soaked, and it's about 1 pound of peas. We've got some salt, we've got some pepper, we've got a little bit of butter here, and you're going to need a pudding bag. You can use one of our linen cloths or any kind of natural fiber cloth and a good string to tie it up with. William Ellis's directions for this pea pudding are very, very simple. We just need to pre-soak our peas, and actually, depending on the kind of peas you have, it kind of takes more or less soaking. These yellow split peas generally only take an hour or two, and then they've soaked up plenty. If you have other peas, that soak time may vary. But all we need to do is really just pour our peas into our pudding bag here. This recipe comes from William Ellis's Country Housewife and Family Companion from about 1750. You definitely want to use some kind of natural fiber, not cheesecloth, because that doesn't have a tight enough texture. There we go. I've tied this off securely, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of room for growth in the bag, not too much. You need to make sure to have a pot of boiling water. This will fit into easily and be completely submerged. Now, he says when you're 2/3 or 3/4 of the way with boiling this, you take it out of your boiling water and mash it up. What we want to do is break up the peas so that they turn into their pudding faster. And when they are beaten up enough, they've broken up, and I think part of his instructions are because the peas that he was using weren't necessarily split peas, but whole peas, and they'll take a lot more breaking up to get them to turn into their kind of homogeneous mixture that they'll end up being. So the split peas probably won't take nearly as much work with that. And then we put it back into the water. Now he says to bring this out when it's 3/4 of the way done. I've experimented with this size pudding before. You'll need to boil this from 2 to 3 hours. So you'll want to take this out at maybe an hour and a half of boiling and beat it up like this. And then it goes back in for another half hour or maybe 45 minutes. A pea pudding like this may not necessarily be the only part of your meal. It could go with other things. And one thing that they typically did was to actually cook their meat boil it in a pot like this and have their pudding being cooked right alongside it. And that helps give your pudding a much more rich flavor, a nice meaty flavor that goes along with it. William Ellis says you can eat this with a bit of bacon or pickled pork, or our farmers, as he says, just eats these with pepper sprinkled over the top. So let's try a little bit of this just simple pea pudding. It's just sliced up. We got a little bit of butter, a little bit of salt and pepper. That's it. Well, it really does just seem to be a carrier for these flavors. It can be a little bland maybe, but actually there's getting more flavor. So you definitely get this wonderful kind of pea flavor in there. The consistency is very, very smooth. This is very homogeneous kind of texture. And it would go well with other things. This really is meant to be a hearty stomach filler for these hardy farmers in the 18th century. Something to really give them some energy to work out in the field with. So you can see, again, a very inexpensive dish for hardworking people in the 18th century. This one is so simple and so inexpensive too. I hope you get a chance to try this out, especially if you're in some kind of historical context. This would look great on the table. I want to thank you for joining me as we savor the flavors and the aromas of the 18th century.